In the evening of the 24th, the imperial quarters were established at Du Levant. Our wings extended, the one towards the bar, the other towards Saint-Dizier, ready to debouch both on the road of Lorraine, on those of Bourgogne, or on the road of Paris, by left bank, according to the intelligence which might be received. Napoleon remained the whole of the 25th at Du Levant. During that moment of rest, the cavalry of General Piret entered Chaumont, intercepted the Langres road, carried off expresses and couriers, raised the peasantry, and spread the alarm from Troyes as far as Vesoul. But on the morning of the 26th, Napoleon was suddenly called back to Saint-Dizier, where the enemy had made a warm attack upon our rear guard. He had forced it to evacuate the town and advanced with confidence of which Napoleon thought he could take advantage. The army, with that view, marched rapidly to the assistance of the rear guard and renewed the action. The cavalry of Generals Milhaud and Sabastiani defeated the enemy at the ford of Valcourt on the Marne. The Allies abandoned Saint-Dizier in disorder and fled by the two opposite roads of Vitry and Bar-sur-Ornain. Napoleon entered Saint-Dizier once more and passed the night there. He thought he was pursued by Prince Schwarzenberg's army, but learnt from the wounded that it was a detachment of Blucher's army with which he had been engaged. It had been uniformly stated in the reports made by the rear guard that we were followed by all the enemy's forces, and it was then ascertained that Vincent-Roda's corps d'armée was the only one sent in pursuit of us. What was then becoming of Schwarzenberg? How did it happen that Blucher's troops, which threatened Meaux but a short time before, were now at the gates of Lorraine? We were lost in conjectures. Napoleon resolved to push a strong reconnaissance as far as Vitry, and in the evening of the 27th he collected under the walls of that place details which might explain the enemy's movements, the testimony of the prisoners, the accounts brought by some of our soldiers who had escaped from the enemy's hands, the bulletins of the Allies, and their printed proclamations brought in by the peasants belonging to the environs of Vitry, ascertained the truth with respect to the events that had just taken place, while Schwarzenberg was employed in forcing the passage of the Aube at Arcy. Blucher had arrived by the Rams Road on the banks of the Marne. He had driven back on the side of Chateau Thierry, the corps of the Dukes de Raguse in Treviso. A junction between the armies of Blucher and Schwarzenberg had been effected on the 23rd. Never since the time of Attila had the great plain extending between Chalon and Arcy been overspread with more troops. The Allies had to decide whether they should march against Napoleon or advance upon Paris. They had hesitated for a long time. The most cautious of their commanders, apprehensive of an Imperial Vendée, had thought of falling back upon the Rhine, and the junction of their forces did not appear less requisite to effect such a retreat than to march forward. But during these transactions, some secret emissaries had arrived from Paris with the intelligence that the Allies were expected by a powerful party. Every kind of fluctuation ceased from that moment, relying upon treason as an auxiliary. The enemy for the first time fixed upon the most enterprising line of conduct, and in the evening of the 23rd of March, a proclamation announcing to France the rupture of the negotiations at Châtillon and the junction of the two grand European armies declared the determination of the Allies to advance in mass upon Paris. It was expected that the Dukes de Treviso and Ragusa would present some obstacles to the enemy's march. They had it in their power to rally the reinforcements and convoys, which every day left the capital to join Napoleon to multiply the hardships suffered by their adversaries, and at last to retreat without being broken as far as the faubourgs of Paris. But we were to be overwhelmed by every misfortune at once. The two marshals, convinced that Napoleon was effecting his retreat upon them, had felt it their duty to move forward to meet him. None of the officers dispatched by the staff had reached them. Having risked a march at Château-Thierry on fair Champenoise, they inconsiderately fell in with the mass of the Allies and were routed with great loss. These events happened on the 25th of March, and they were made public by the Allies under the title of the Victory of Fair Champenoise. On the same day, the 25th, the convoy of General Pachard, charged with the artillery and stores sent from Paris, was carried off on the side of Saint-Pierre. These cannon were added to the pieces which the enemy boasted to have taken at the action of Fair Champenoise. To sum up all, the success of the Allies was complete. Fortune seemed to take delight in multiplying in their favor the fruits of their rencontre at Arcy. They were advancing upon Paris with fugitives only before them. The veil which covered our situation had scarcely been withdrawn when Napoleon mounted his horse, left Vitry, and re-entered Saint-Dizier with all his troops. He shut himself up in his cabin and passed the night between the 27th and the 28th with his maps. If the Allies made a good use of their advantages by marching upon Paris, we had it in our power to make good use of ours. We were masters of our movements. Nothing prevented us any longer from rallying the garrisons, from stopping up the road, and from inflicting an exemplary punishment on the audacity with which that multitude of foreigners had ventured into the heart of our provinces. Let the capital submit to its destinies, but let it be the grave of the enemy. That extremity was constantly contemplated from the beginning of the campaign. Napoleon had made every effort to familiarize himself with suitable determinations. His plans were formed in conformity to it, and he had only to persist. In the moment, however, for action, everything underwent a change. The consideration of the dangers to which Paris was exposed predominated. He was constantly harassed with the picture which was drawn of its perils. In the midst of his misfortunes, he was apprehensive of appearing stern and absolute. He yielded, and all the resources which he still possessed were sacrificed to the safety of the capital. Chapter 11, Countermarch Paris from the 28th to the 31st of March. Paris was capable of resistance for some days. The Parisians had promised to defend it, but could Napoleon arrive time enough to assist them? The enemy, marching across the plains which had been already ravaged, completely exhausted them, and we could not follow their traces without the risk of losing ourselves in deserts. We were therefore obliged to take a route less exhausted. We have already noticed Napoleon's care to preserve the command of that along the left bank of the Seine. Our rear guard was still in echelon between Saint-Dizier and Deuxlavant. It returned towards Bar-sur-Aube. The army, in pursuing that movement, would debouch on the road to Troyes. The avenues leading to Paris would lie before us, and the Seine, henceforth separating us from the enemy, would render our marches more secure. That plan was adopted by Napoleon. However advanced the enemy might be, he hoped to arrive in time to rally his forces under the cannon of Montmartre and discuss the last conditions of peace in person.